Chapter 6. The Adventure of the Pass of Tears. Into the Pass of Tears there came no sunshine. Through all the world the red dawn glowed in the east, and the bright hosts of morning swept over earth and sky. But they could not pierce the barrier of the tall and solemn pines on the cliffs of the pass. Their day was little more than twilight, and the darkness of night was heavy and dread. When a wind came, it lost its joyousness within the border, and was nothing more than a sigh and a moan among the gloomy trees. And through the darkened gorge, when Sir Constant came to the pass, its desolation chilled him, and afterwards its spell deepened hour by hour. Cold and cheerless as the scene were the hearts and homes of the people. For there was no smile of welcome, no word of goodwill. Some answered his greeting listlessly, and some looked and turned their eyes aside. They had no fellowship for a passer-by, and little fellowship with one another. Nay, some would turn away when they saw him near, as though unwilling to meet a face unknown, and some would hasten into their dwellings and bar the door, as though every stranger must be a foe. For them there seemed to be no potency in the shining shield that showed the king's emblem, ever a joy to men of good will, and a menace to the evil powers that walked the world. The day passed with deepening gloom, and night drew near with no promise of hospitable doors. It was then that he came upon an old man who sat before a cottage, watching the shadows that gathered in the pass, and so deep in his own thoughts that at first he did not hear the approaching footsteps. When at last he heard, he rose hastily and would have gone into his house. But our knight challenged him with urgency. "What is this?" he cried. "Would you close your door against a lonely traveler? Is not the emblem of the great king a surety for me?" The old man paused and looked at the emblem, and as he marked the bearing of the challenger, it seemed that he was shamed a little. He answered coldly, yet not discourteously, "The emblem has no power in this pass. Yet I will not close my door against a traveler. Enter, Sir Knight, and receive of what I have." So he brought food and drink, and showed a place where the stranger might rest, though it was plain that few had come to be his guests before. In the doing of these things his eyes brightened a little, and he scanned the knight's face with some faint eagerness. Nay, he even began to ask him of his journey, and listened while he told of the perils of the way. Ever and anon his grey cheeks flushed as he heard of some sore fight or deadly danger. Yet when the tale was told, the light died away from his face. "Sore peril have you passed," he said, "yet none so sore as that which meets you now. For this pass is the pass perilous, in which the bravest heart may fight in vain. It is strewn with broken blades and rusted armor." "What is the peril?" asked Sir Constant. "Fear not to tell me." And the old man told him. "This pass is peril and trial beyond any that a man may bear, and few are those that sustain it. Under its spell they see that the city beyond the hill is a dream and a mockery. For otherwise this cruel peril could not be. No king would suffer it. So they leave the pass and escape its peril. They are never again found on the splendid way, Never again do they bear the shield of the royal emblem. Then they are recantant knights, cried Sir Constant, but the old man looked at him sadly. Speak no ill of them, till you have known their adventure, he said. As for me, I have no word save the word of pity. That rebuke is just, said Sir Constant. Foolish it were to despise any untried peril of the way. Therefore tell me more. I speak of terror and fear, said the old man, and the terror and fear go cloaked in mystery. The holders of this pass are two veiled sisters, whose true home no man knows, but who challenge every traveler who comes this way. There is no escape, for no door can keep them out, and when they lay their hands upon their prey, the heart grows cold, the hand falls numb from the useless sword, and every bright hope dies. Sad is the doom of the men whom they have touched, for they sit ever after gazing with hopeless eyes into a sunless world. Chilling and sad was this strange tale. But who are they? Asked Sir Constant. Whence have they their power? Are they not veiled? Said the old man. The veil is a symbol of the mystery which enshrouds them. But they have ruled in this pass from the beginning of time, and no man may say when their rule shall cease. Oft they go together, oft they move alone, but both have might and power, whether together or apart, and the terror of their spell is beyond the power of words. But surely some have defied their power and broken free, said Sir Constant, and the old man smiled bitterly. Some have passed on as if victorious, he said. It has even been said that some have been better knights after this battle. Perchance the spell does not hold at all, but I know well that it is sadness and loss unspeakable. Yet this place is within the rule of the great king. Is it not so? Then the old man answered still more bitterly. I have heard that the great king truly claims governance of this territory. Look over to that hill, where the pines gather so thickly. What do you see there? Then Sir Constant rose and strode to the door of the cottage, and looked over across the path to the hill on the farther side. There the pines stood in dark array against the evening sky. But presently he said, I see a wall and a tower. And the old man answered him, Look, Sir Knight, and wonder. Truly there is a wall and a tower, but no man has seen them near, for about them stands a trackless forest, full of gloom and fear. Yet some say that this castle is a king's castle, the dwelling of a warden set over the Pass of Tears. And you have never seen him? We have never seen him. The story is but a story, the fond fantasy of some too trustful heart. If the king had lordship here, could the loss and terror of the past go on forever? No, there is no king, there is no warden, and the story is but a story. So hopeless he spoke that for a time our knight could not answer him. And while he pondered, the old man went to an inner chamber. Presently he returned, bearing a sword and shield. But the sword was an old sword, rust-eaten and unworthy, and the shield was dishonored by the damp and dust of years. None could have declared that it bore the emblem of the royal service. Mark these, said the old man sadly. They are the shield and sword of one Sir Pellerin, a young knight so confident and light of heart in the old days that Men called him Sir Pelerin the Glad. Long ago he came to this pass, brave in the courage of youth and sure that no power could sever him from the king's service. But he met the veiled sisters, and when they touched him, his assurance passed like a shadow. Ay, these are his arms, which he cast away with many words of scorn. Yet no man had ever desired the king's pleasure more than he. Sadder than any sad tale was the sight of that sword and shield. Truly this is a dolorous thing to see, said Sir Constant. But what was the end of that knight? Was he slain in the pass? Better had he been slain, perchance, said the old man. Nay, he was not slain. Let it be enough that he would serve that king no more. Think of him with compassion, as with compassion and mourning I have kept his arms. That will I do, said Sir Constant. And heavily he spoke, for the dread of the past was strong upon his spirit, and his heart was sore for Sir Pelerin the Glad. Yet at last he remembered how the star had shone for him often in the sorest need. So he bade his spirit to be strengthened, and sought to speak bravely in this house of fear. Here are mystery and dread, he said, and sadness beyond measure. Nevertheless, even in this pass I will maintain the honor of the king's service, in the truth of his power. The old man sat with his head bowed, and seemed to mourn in his memories. Yet as Sir Constant spoke so bravely his heart was a little stirred, and his hand shook upon the hilt of the lost Sir Pelerin. But only for a moment, for afterwards he said with a sigh, At last, you have not known the touch of the veiled sisters, but midnight comes. Night reigned without a star in the pass of tears, and hour by hour its spell of silence and solitude grew deeper. At an hour before midnight, Sir Constant rose and armed himself, and thereafter sat with his shield upon his arm and his sword drawn. For I will not be taken unaware, he said, or without the sign of my service upon me. This must be well, sighed the old man, for watchfulness is as surely a law of battle as bravery is. Alas, not thus did Sir Pelerin. So sure was his confidence that he despised the peril in which he stood. Thereafter they sat conversing a little, but chiefly watching and listening. And at the stroke of midnight there was a low moaning through the gorge, as though the watchful pines wailed a warning of terror that came. The old man trembled and looked fearfully at the barred door. Then came a faint sound of footsteps, and the moaning of the pines died away in a strange, dread stillness. Then Sir Constant stood up, with his shield dressed and his sword drawn. But the veiled sisters were already there. Two they were, one robed in black robes, and the other in grey garments, whose misty outlines seemed to mingle with the shadows in the chamber. The one of sombre hue stood at his side, and laid her hand upon his heart. Regardless of the glory of the shield, and at that touch he shook in his armor, and all his world reeled and swayed. His heart was chilled, his eyes were dimmed. Almost the good sword slipped from his nerveless fingers. His lips were parted, but he had no words, and his cheeks were blanched with fear and despair. The city of his dreams was gone. In those eastern hills were fabrics of the clouds, beautiful but false. The splendid way was a folly forlorn, in the tales of gallant deeds, but the legends that win the fancy of a child. No, said his quivering heart, if there were a great king, this evil could not be. Nor was there an answer to the gib, and he knew that, like those others, he must now sit forever, looking with darkened eyes into a sunless world. Seeing his face, the gray old man moaned again and bowed his head. And the one who had touched him spoke to the other sister. Sister, I have touched his heart, and it is ours. It is ours, said the gray sister, and I leave it nevermore. Then the veiled sisters turned as though to leave the chamber. But now our knight fought back along the steep path of anguish to memory and courage. He was as one who battles with surging waves to keep his head above them, so that he may glimpse the shore. Well it was for him in that hour that he had donned his arms, for they did much to hearten him. Their touch told of battles almost as deadly as this, yet in the end victorious, so that hope stirred once more, and courage held back that cold tide of despair. Then he lifted his eyes, and lo, the casement of the cottage, black as the blackest night, but in the blackest blackness a gleam, as of a star faint and distant. It could not be a star, for over against the casement stood the mighty hill of pines, trackless and dread. But a star it was to him, of joy and strength and aid, like the shield of Sir Felix in the wood of beasts. So his challenge rang out sudden, clear, and strong. Stand and answer me. Where are you come? By whom are you sent to trouble us? I am a knight of the great king. In the king's name speak. Then the old man looked up, amazed. In his amazement, he seemed to echo our knight's cry, for he said strangely, I am a knight of the great king. In the king's name speak. But the challenge rang out with mystic power. And the robes of the dark sisters quivered among the shadows. Then out of the shadows they answered in one sad voice, in that name we answer, for the great king has power even in this path. Dare you follow us whither we go? Then Sir Constant rejoiced, for it seemed in that moment that the power of the great king filled the chamber. Almost eagerly he stepped forward to follow. But then the old man of the cottage stayed him by an urgent and pitiful cry. "Oh, my good comrade, leave me not alone, for I am he that was once Sir Pellerin the Glad." Then Sir Constant, filled with compassion, a flood so warm that it drove the last dread from his heart. "Nay," he said, "I will not leave you, for you shall go with me. But bring out your mail, for none may dare the pass unarmed." So Sir Pellerin brought his armor, so long unused, and Sir Constant helped him to buckle it in place. Little skill had the old man, and much shame, and ever and anon the tears filled his eyes and hindered him. But in a while his bowed form was cased in gallant steel again, his grey head helmed, and on his arm he bore the weighty shield of the king's service. With pain he bore it, yet heartened mightily by his comrade's love. And when he was fully mailed, Sir Constant spoke to the veiled sisters waiting in the shadows. "Lead on," he said. "In the king's name we follow." Now it was well past midnight of a cold and cheerless night, and the aspect of the pass was dark and daunting. There was a faint wailing and whispering of the pines above them, a lone and chilling murmur of a stream below. But hope had shone bravely out of the darkness of fear, and though the path was sorely broken and troublous, they followed stoutly. From the door their way led downwards to the depths of the pass, where the stream moaned and murmured. As they drew near, the moaning deepened. Then the old man trembled, for that voice had haunted him through night and day for many years. But the veiled sisters went on till they were at the verge of the unseen water. And still they went on, and lo, the still and deadly waters were about their feet, for they were crossing the stream by stepping stones that had made a ford even in the depths of the pass. And the old man said, "These many years have I been a dweller, yet I knew not of this ford." So they crossed the stream unharmed, and began to ascend the hill to the other side. Steep it was and dolorous, and the gloom of the forest was unbroken. Soon the great trees whispered faintly all about them, and gathered like ghostly sentinels beside the path. But surely and steadily the veiled sisters went on, and something of peace came when the moan of the dark stream ceased. It seemed a trackless forest, said the old man. So all these years I've never dared it. Yet there is a way. Ay, said Sir Constant, but there is more. Once I saw a light among the trees, as of a distant star. Surely it is the light I saw from your window, when the great fear had almost overwhelmed me. Then the old man strove to raise his head, and often after that he sought to pierce the gloom before them, despite the toil of the way and the weight of his mail. And at last he said, I saw a light even then. It must be from the tower of the warden's castle. Never have I seen this before. In the past we never look up, and when night comes we bar our doors in fear and dread. Still the veiled sisters led on in silence through the forest and the night, and at last it was plain that they had led to the place upon the utmost cliff, where the castle stood. And ever the light shone more steadily, till it was greater than a star. Then over the crest of the hill came a gentle breeze to play upon the old man's withered temples. And when the knights felt it, they thought of morning over the eastern hills. But it was morning also in the Pass of Tears, for then they came out of the pines to the crest of the hill. And lo, on the other side of the hill, the sun was rising over a fair, wide plain, in all the dazzling glory of a new day. Here was their wonder great indeed, for on the crest of the hill stood the warden's castle, with soaring turrets and massy battlements, a place of royal power. On the tallest tower was placed a crown of gold, plated in semblance of thorns, and it was the gold and jewels of this crown that caught the beams of the sun, and gave the beacon light which they had seen in the past. So it was that the symbol of royal pain and royal triumph was in the Pass of Tears, a star of hope and comfort. Here the two knights would have paused to gaze, filled with joy, but still the veiled sisters passed on towards the castle gates. In the light of that glad morning their terror was gone, and their sombre robes were white as morning mists. Then forth from the open gates came the warden of the Pass of Tears, walking to meet them. His bearing was great majesty, yet passing gentle, and when Sir Pellerin saw his face, his heart was overcome. He gave a great cry and ran, and fell at the warden's feet, with hands clasped and head bowed low. And the warden laid his hands upon his head with great tenderness, so that the old knight shook with mingled joy and shame. Then the warden said to the veiled sisters who stood by, Sisters of sorrow and pain, show your faces that he may fear you no more. You have conquered, and we obey, said the veiled sisters, and they drew back their veils so that the terror of their spell passed away forever. For the light of the warden's face fell upon those dread features, so that the anguish of pain was softened into peace, and the bitterness of sorrow was changed into the sadness of fond yearning. But the darkness which had been theirs lingered for a moment upon the brows of the warden, like the shadow of a fleeting cloud upon a quiet sea. Then the old man cried, remembering the darkened years. They that dwell in the past, oh, that they might know. But the warden answered, with great yearning in his voice, the mystery of the past is the mystery of death, and these are the sisters of that mystery. Yet they also, though they have great power, are under the king's rule, and the command it is commanded that if any in the past speak to them in the king's name, they must lead him to my presence. For in the king's power I have conquered these, and they must obey. And here I dwell ever in wait, while the stars by night and the sun by day make my crown a guiding light. But men's eyes, clouded by the darkness of the past, will not see. My lord, said the old man sorely. And oft, said the warden, when the veiled sisters have passed, I walk among the dwellings in the night, and knock and wait at the doors. And if any open to me, I go in and give them peace. Afterwards, leading them out of the past to the hills beyond. But men bar their doors, and I linger in vain until the morning break, knocking and waiting. Oh, my lord, said the old man, oft have I heard a low knocking in the dead of night, but in my fear and bitterness I would not open. Yet now I see that if I had opened, I would have found you there. And he covered his face again in shame. Nay, said the warden, all is well now, and once more shall you be Sir Pellerin the Glad. And then to the veiled sisters he said, Go back to your own place for yet a little longer. It is the king's will. So the two veiled their faces and turned, passing into the forest. And as they went, the glory of the warden's presence faded away from their garments, which became dark and misty as before. For still they must walk in the paths of tears, two sisters, sorrow and pain, until the day comes when the great king shall bid them pass away forever. And old Sir Pellerin knelt at the warden's feet. In his joy he would have knelt there forever. And the warden smiled upon Sir Constans, saying, I sought him long, for I loved him. To me you have been as hands and feet by your good courage. But no man may conquer a peril of the splendid way without saving a brother also. Then the day spread wider. The last mists fled before it, and its splendor touched the face of the warden, full of majesty and compassion, and with scars upon the brows. These are the scars of ancient thorns, and they shall never pass away. for they are a sign to all mankind that the warden himself has faced the dire peril of the pass of tears and knows the utmost of its power. You, therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus, and the things that you have heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit you to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. You, therefore, endure hardness, as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No man that warreth entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who has chosen him to be a soldier. 2 Timothy 2:1-4.